The fact that we're not even sure whether a Hand Trap Torrential Tribute-esque card is good or not is ridiculous. So Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed a lot in the past 2 to 3 years, a lot of people can agree with me on that one, and that has been reflected by the fact that combo decks are now way better than they were before, which means that hand traps are a little less good, so if you only see one of them, it might not be good enough. I'm saying this because back in the days in like 2016, for example, when people used to play Metal Foes Yang Zing, the deck could actually make 4 negates pretty consistently, but if you saw one copy of Ghost Ogre or Veiler and you used it correctly, you could actually stop your opponent from doing pretty much the full combo, whereas now, if you only have one hand trap, your opponent might still make 6 negates through it. Of course, with a card like Nibiru the Primal Being, it is really hard to combo off carelessly because as soon as you summon 5 or more times in a turn, your opponent unlocks the ability to use Nibiru to tribute every single monster on the field at pretty much any given point during the turn. However, since tributing is not a cost, Nibiru would have to successfully resolve to tribute anything, so if the effect or the activation gets negated, such as with cards like Appaloosa or Crystal Wing that were summoned in summon number 4, 5, or whatever, you will be able to negate the Nibiru and proceed with your combo. That means that drawing Nibiru in multiple copies is really bad, and also that Nibiru alone might not be enough. However, Nibiru combined with another hand trap might be pretty good. And this is really where a lot of people will agree with me on that one. Nibiru alone is pretty bad, but Nibiru plus Veiler, or Nibiru plus Imperm, or Nibiru plus Ogre, for example, against the Wandering Griffin Rider that people are playing because of the Brave Token engine, is pretty nice at stopping your opponent's board, because if your opponent does have the negation for your Nibiru, you could simply chain the Veiler to negate that card that is trying to negate your Nibiru, therefore your Nibiru will resolve, tributing everything on the field, and if your opponent doesn't have further extenders, you might just stop your opponent's turn completely at that point. People have a tendency to Nibiru very late in the opponent's combo because they want to force their opponents to overcommit as much as possible, waste as many cards from the hand, deck, field, extra deck, etc., so that they always get worn out, and even if they have extenders, it might not be enough by the time they get hit by the Nibiru, where sometimes it actually might make sense to Nibiru earlier than later because you don't want your opponent to get a specific kind of card either on the field or in the graveyard. So for example, do not let your opponent resolve the effect of Anaconda to send Fusion Destiny and summon the Destiny will destroy Phoenix Enforcer, just a Nibiru on the summon of Phoenix Enforcer. That makes no sense because your opponent can't chain the Phoenix Enforcer to destroy itself, and then it'll simply come back on your own next turn rather, not on your opponent's next turn, which is even worse because you're pretty much letting your opponent keep one negate, whereas you could have just Nibiru'd on the summon of Verte Anaconda, which would have been infinitely better. Another extremely important thing to keep into consideration, and I think this one, a lot of people just don't really respect it enough, but if you Nibiru when your opponent uses a card that mails, you're not really getting the best value, because if your opponent summons something like, let's say Chaos Ruler, the Chaotic Magical Dragon, the card doesn't really lose to Nibiru. However, you might actually benefit off of the mail so much that even if you get Nibiru'd, it's really not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, your opponent lost a lot of value. For example, if you mail something like Fairy Tale Snow, the Nibiru doesn't really stop Snow in the graveyard, so next turn, if you're playing a deck that heavily relies on the normal summon, such as Prank Kids that didn't draw the Rite of Aramesia, you might actually lose at that point. And to make matters worse, Nibiru has a very high likelihood of being completely dead in the main deck in Game 1 because it doesn't really do anything against decks that have a slower kind of pace that can afford to play in less than 5 summons such as Flunderies, Sky Striker, and even Eldritch. I really recommend playing Nibiru, however, in the side deck if you are playing in a less competitive environment such as locals or regionals, because a lot of people will be playing rogue and fun decks that might actually summon so much that they will lose to Nibiru, and they aren't really resilient enough to be able to play through Nibiru, so they aren't really like combo decks. Whereas if you're playing in a YCS environment, I really do recommend only playing Nibiru if you're also playing a lot of the other hand traps as well, because Nibiru is a very good card, but not on its own against everyone. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. It really depends on the situation. So that's pretty much all I had to say for this video. Let me know what you guys actually think of Nibiru in the comment section below, and also let me know if you agree with, the fact that Nibiru is only good in very specific situations, but I really want to hear it. And also don't forget to like and subscribe, check me out on Twitch and Instagram. I'll see you guys very soon. Peace.